Welcome to the Principal Podcast, where we talk about how the best professional services firms grow. Whether you're looking to scale your firm or learn from the stories of founders and leaders who've done it, you're in the right place. Join us as we interview the best leaders in professional services. Let's get on with the show. Alex, welcome to the Principal Podcast. Happy to have you.
Guillaume, glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
It is my pleasure. Let's jump straight into it. What's the story, Alex? What got you into leadership development, facilitation, and advisory work in the first place?
Straightforward question, very, very deep territory, I think. So I'll try and be succinct with it.
Go for it.
So I think to kind of paint the picture, I was living in Berlin for 6 years and was trying to find community there, being new, and joined a group there more focused around kind of psychosomatic work. And after a little while, they asked me to start facilitating in the space, and I didn't really have any experience with it. But I kind of jumped into it and found that it was kind of a natural realm for me. And I think from there, just realized I definitely wanted to do training and kind of deepen the knowledge and tool set. And so I did a lot of training, got my master's in organizational development and leadership. So that's kind of like on the facilitation side. But even backtracking before that, grew up in a family business, hotels, hospitality, food and beverage. So I was around the kind of organizational structure, so to speak, from a very young age. I worked in the hotel industry for quite some time before joining my family business. And I worked both operations as general manager and then also acquisitions and development, kind of like a growth mindset there, and got to a point where the system, the structure wasn't equipped for what I wanted to be doing, which was more than just what was encompassed within the kind of the four walls, so to speak, of a hotel. So I decided to leave. I have a passion in music, so I went into the music industry, moved to Austin, Texas, put together a deal for a music venue, worked for my business partner there, kind of in festival production. I'm sharing this because as a means to the lens of kind of the wide-ranging interests that I had, which I think lends itself for the work that I do now. And we are in facilitation, but very much also in leadership development. And so I think, a long-winded way of answering your question is that I've always had an interest in personal growth through my self-expansion, in bringing the deeper questions of life into the business world. I think kind of my role is really that bridge. So I think in facilitation, that's what really interests me in that, is how does one sync up the human kind of situation, so to speak, within the business world and business context to make more coherence in otherwise somewhat incoherent world.
Love that. Houston, Texas here. So we are not too far from each other, Alex.
Okay.
So all this leading and building up to what? What is the problem that you help people solve today?
I think a lot of the issues is, so fundamentally when we have businesses, organizations come to us, they're looking for solutions to the problems that they're facing. But I think a precursor to that, which they don't quite know from the get-go, is that it's somewhat of an identity situation where a lot of the leaders in the higher up positions and leadership levels don't have a strong understanding of both themselves and the teams that they're running. And I think because of that, a lot of it is, I don't want to say kind of intuitively leading the teams that they oversee or themselves. But I think what we find is that there's incredible power in understanding the, so to speak, operating propensities of the individual and of the group dynamics themselves. And so we use a set of, when we go into an engagement, whether it's with an individual or with a team, we'll have kind of the initial discovery process. And part of that is using diagnostic lenses to bring about those leadership patterns that we see in the individual and system, to really put evidence-based data against what it is that they're seeing as issues. So for example, I'll share the three assessments that we use. One of them is Kolbe, which I think some of the listeners might be familiar with. The gist of it is really like, what are the action propensities of the leaders? And so if, going back to your question, if the team doesn't know, for example, one of the propensities is how does the leader take action? So for me, I'm a quick start in the Kolbe methodology, which means when I have something come my way, I'm wanting to take action around it. That's great, but if you don't have someone who also can balance that out from kind of a system structural integrity point of view, then it's just all forward movement without kind of having the structure in place to support it. And so that's one example. Another within Kolbe is how you receive and make sense of information. For example, I need a touch, feel, sense, perceive to fully integrate something new into my world, whereas someone else can pick up a book and read it and get the whole, gist of it. Hopefully also with, some lived experience from there, but that's Kolbe. We also use Cantor, which is based off of David Cantor's work at MIT. He was in family systems. And that's around the whole idea of structural dynamics. There's three models within the system where a lot of the problems that we see within organizations come up. This one's really fascinating. It's very much around communication. So the first is the operating systems, and you can either have an open system, closed or random. Closed, think hierarchical, kind of more military or large scale corporations. Open is and so that's where like rules, regulations, procedures are very much followed to a T. Hierarchical. Open is maybe smaller, more nimble companies, groups, and then random is, think startup. They can shift between closed, open, and a lot of it has to do with the leadership at the top. So that's the operating system. And then there's the actions, which there's four of. So it can be a move, like moving an idea forward, a follow, which could be continuing that thought process. Another one is oppose. So challenging someone who makes like a move. And then there's bystand, which is someone who might be observing conversation and then at the end might summarize or offer reflections. And you want to have all of them. For example, if you just have four people in a conversation and they're all moving thoughts forward, then you're not really, it's going to be differing frames of mind and ideas, and you're not really honing in on something. And potentially you're also not having someone oppose a move thought. So it just creates more of a coherent conversational dialogic structure. And then the last is the communication domain. So there's affect, which is much more, think of empaths, emotional, like open-hearted. And then there's meaning, which is what is the deeper meaning, purpose, values behind it, is what it is that we're discussing. And then there's power, which is all about kind of tangible outcomes. Why is this something that we want to do? When you think of the business world, it's more of kind of the power language. So those are the different kind of aspects of the Cantor model. And so those are the two external assessments. And then we have one internal called Pathfinder, which is based on Jungian psychology around the archetypes. And it's very much the core to what we do, which is around pattern language. And so it's how we understand the leadership signature of those that we work with. And so the idea is, it's really quickly 4 quadrants. There's they're visionary, which is seeing the big picture and kind of the purpose behind what it is that we're setting out to do. There's relational, which is the kind of communal aspect of what it is to be in contact with other humans. There's insight, which is looking at possibilities in kind of the analytical mindset, if you will. And then there's what we call warrior, which is more of performance based. So it's really the idea of like moving things forward. And I bring this one up because, again, like in a team, if you have everyone who are just, for example, on the analytical side, you're just going to be, it's like analysis paralysis, nothing's moved forward. So you want to have someone who has more of like the performance mindset, who can take all those ideas and really move forward what it is that seems to be the best opportunity. So I think, to answer your question in a very long-winded way, the problem is there's a lack, I think, of sense making of the dynamics that make up the individual and the team. And because of that, there can be conflict, incoherence within the system. And so what we are all about is bringing coherence to the individual, to the team, to the organization. And I think like one other thing that comes to mind too, and we may have jumped on this anyways later on in the conversation, but with AI, like there's just the speed at which things are coming at us is so much faster. And I think a lot of the human to human connection within the workplace it's just happening so fast that there's a lack of the time to kind of take a step back and understand where things might be getting stuck and where more time could be given to create a little bit more flow in the way that people work together.
So thank you for this, Alex. That's very detailed. The question I like to ask here is, I'm the CEO of a company that you're trying to help, and you're just left with my signature. Like there is just my sign off to start the project. What's the benefit? Like I understand. So there are different ways, different frameworks of looking at human interactions, right? Human capital, coherence, and I'm gonna say it bluntly, but why should people care? Like, what does that help? And I know there is a good answer to that question. That's why I'm asking it. But like, what is the value of solving people incoherence within teams?
I think ultimately
is there.
Yeah. I think ultimately the biggest benefit is just better decisions, and better decisions lead to better outcomes for the organization and better business model. I think I think.
So you're helping organizations make better, faster decisions with more flourishing humans inside it.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, going back to the pace of the world today, a lot of decisions are made under pressure. And in what we do is give light and shed light to leaders' actions under pressure, which also includes blind spots, shadow sides of kind of their leadership signature. And so, right, I had a teacher once who said the first step to change is awareness. And so it's really about bringing awareness to actions under pressure, because so much of the time in the workplace today is under pressure. And so I think ultimately, like I said, at the beginning of this question, was it leads to better decisions, and better decisions, fundamentally lead to better business models.
Mm-hmm. That does make a lot of sense. Who is it that you help make better decisions? Do you have a specific industry, company size, job title? Like, who ends up working with Alex?
Yeah. A lot of the times we'll work with organizations that are either facing succession gaps, or maybe leadership derailment risk, or transformation that they're trying to implement that could be stalling. And so that really spans the universe in terms of who we work with, both in terms of size. Like I said before, it can be just with individuals, and then also system-wide with organizations. But we'll work with, and we have worked with family businesses, startups, like I said, individual executives, nonprofits, government. We've worked with large scale institutions. We've done engagements in South Asia to bring together different nation states that were having to solve issues where they were facing a dilemma together. And so, it really, ultimately our MO is about having the greatest impact possible, not just within the organizations that we serve, but societally. So it's really important to us that we're working with like-minded individuals and organizations. So it hits all of kind of the multifaceted in terms of industries, but I think the common thread is that elevating the societal context is kind of the mission that we're after.
So I like it. That's the positioning. But is there a specific vertical then, or is it pretty much industry agnostic? Like when you think about, okay, I need to get into a room with that type of people to, one, sign a deal, but two, help them, because at the end of the day, this is what we're getting paid for, right? It's to help people. So is there such a thing, or is it pretty much any industry, any company size?
Okay, so you don't mean in terms of like the personnel that we're dealing with, you mean more from like an industry
perspective?
Yeah.
Both. So there's going to be, and that's what I like with leadership development and overall organizational structure companies or consulting firms, is that there's going to be typically, and that was going to be one of my subsequent questions, there's going to be the person that makes the decision, right, of hiring you, Alex, because they're like, hey, we have a problem. Our people are not productive enough, right? It's your first problem. But underneath of that, there is, hey, we have an organizational structure issue. Our leaders are not leading the way they should, and the cohesion between the team is not what it should be. And we believe we could be better, faster, and making more revenue if our team was making better, faster decisions. So there's the person who acknowledges that, who hires you, Alex. But then there is the person and the team you end up working with, right? Which is not necessarily the same. The entry point is not necessarily the same as well. So that's what I was going to get to. But for that, I want us and the audience to understand who is it that Alex helps typically.
Yeah. It is pretty industry agnostic, but we do have a lot of similar organizations that we've worked with. One of them is in family businesses. So we've done a lot of work with family office, family business space. And I can share more about that later, because kind of the model around that is similar with the different industries that we serve. But family businesses, we work, again, like I said, with governments, and that's on a global scale. We've worked with the World Bank a decent amount in the past. We've done executive leadership with NASA. We've worked with private equity, startups. So it really is much agnostic, I would say. But we've worked with a lot of the same clients over the years, because what we do is organizational development and leadership development. And I think a big ethical concern with that is that when we go into a system and start serving them, that they don't become so dependent on us. But because we work with larger institutions a lot of the time, what will happen is we'll work with specific leaders and then kind of set them on their way. And then we might move to a different vertical within that larger organization. But it is, we touch a lot in terms of those that we serve. And I think, the issue is that we usually get brought in when something is already not working, whereas it would be much easier and better if, things were maybe more like in the green or yellow, and we were brought in to elevate what's already working. But a lot of the times we come in when it's more of like a yellow or orange, red, whatever color you want to apply to it.
It's painkillers versus vitamins, right? People won't take their vitamins, but when they are in pain, they're going to try to reduce that pain. So I guess that's the nature of professional services at the end of the day. It does make a lot of sense. And it takes a lot of, educational brand awareness kind of approach as well to get people to become problem aware before it becomes a problem. I have that discussion a lot with people helping with cybersecurity. It's like, you don't think you need cybersecurity until someone asks you for $10 million ransom.
Right.
Then you're like, yeah, this is a $10 million problem. So yeah, I get it. So speaking of which, Alex, what has worked for you guys to market, brand, get the attention of those people in those various industries, right? Because at the end of the day, when you can help everyone, it's hard for someone to be able to relate directly. But I get it. People are people, right? And whether people are in the manufacturing industry or in the finance industry, they are still people. So yeah, what has worked for you guys and Dialogos or Dialogos? How should I pronounce it?
Yeah, well, we're shifting more. So we've always been Dialogos, but we are shifting more to technological.
Dialogos.
Yeah,
I like it.
Which is a whole nother podcast conversation.
Positioning. So what has worked for you guys to get the attention of the right people and get the foot in the door? I'm not talking about sales just yet, but really just, marketing and branding.
Yeah, we work with an external group who helps a lot with kind of the marketing efforts, but it's a, for all intents and purposes, they're more internal, but we don't need to have such a big push so let me say this. So Bill Isaacs is our CEO. He founded the company along with Skip Griffin. Bill came out of the whole systems theory period out of MIT. He started the Center for Organizational Leadership and Development there. So a lot of our relationships were based out of the work that he had done there. And then also he wrote a book on dialogue and the art of thinking together. And so people still pick that book up and will reach out to us, or, the relationships that were formed during that time. Some of your listeners might know the other names like Otto Scharmer, Peter Senge, Chris Argyris was Bill's mentor when he was studying. So it's really it's the network effect. And I think it's this idea of like creating trust and impact for those that we serve. And it's either them coming back to us or referrals so it's more of this, it has been more of this organical growth. And we've been working more on what we're putting out into the world from like a newsletter standpoint, which we're doing once a month now. And the content that goes into that. We're trying to do more with LinkedIn engagement. And, things like this, just getting the good word out, like however we can. And we're at somewhat of an inflection point because we were very engagement heavy prior to this. And like I said, we're moving to more of a technological, model, if you will, while still continuing the engagements that we have done and will continue to do. But so it's a very interesting inflection point where we're continuing to feel into what makes the most sense for us as it relates to marketing. We also do a lot of educational opportunities. And so through that, we are able to grow our reach because we'll certify other practitioners in the Dialogos methodology, and then also the Pathfinder assessment that I mentioned. And so it's equipping others with our institutional knowledge, and then kind of letting that organically spread as a means to marketing. So it's something that we could always continue to refine. I mean, as you know, like you never want to just think that you have it right. And so we're always seeking feedback, always seeking external, ideas and support, so on and so forth.
Love that. And that does make a lot of sense. How do you tie it all to revenue, Alex? How do you move from this positioning, those different frameworks, those different operating systems, to, LinkedIn posting and so on, to a conversation, a sales conversation, an SOW, a letter of engagement with rock and roll? How does sales motion look like for Dialogos/Dialogos?
Yeah, it's different on the person who's doing the efforts. I'll give you how I kind of operate, which is, when I was working at one point in hotels, it was very much in a sales position, and we would get a lead, and it was very transactional, so straightforward and methodical in how it worked. But that's not the case here. Like, we'll have someone who will be interested in our work and think it might be a good fit, and it could be 3 years from that initial conversation where they finally realize that the time is now to do it. And like, that's one example. Another example is with some of the practitioner training that we're doing, where I'll have someone who's read Bill's book come to us and say, hey, I'd love to have a conversation. And it's tracking all of those solo practitioners so that once we hit a certain threshold, where we have enough for like a new cohort of our mastery program, that I'll then reach back out to them. So it's this idea first, it's planting the seeds, letting the seeds grow a little bit, and then knowing when to push forward. So it's this whole idea of the balance of forward movement and then waiting to know when to let things sit a little bit more and when to harvest them. I mean, I think it really is, for me, it comes down to intuition, to know when to push things forward, and to know where the energy is where the energy is pulling us. And that's not to say that that's the right model for everyone. Like, again, like when I was working in hotels, it's much more of a linear path. Yeah. And I mean, I will say when we have an engagement with, say, like an institution or an individual who wants to get coached up, that's a little bit more clear. They give us they say that they have interest. We have an initial discovery call. And sometimes it is very straightforward, where we will just scope out the engagement and it's a pretty quick turnaround. So it just depends on the territory. But I think that's where it comes down to just knowing if the person you're speaking with is ready to do this type of work, because we do work at a deeper level. We believe very much that before any kind of the structural issues and business issues get resolved, first there needs to be more of a dive into the relational phase and the communicative phase. And once that feels a little bit more stronger, and it can be done in parallel, but that kind of needs to get flushed out first. So it really depends on the readiness of the individual, of the group that we're working with. I don't know if that answered your question, but.
No, it does. I think what you're alluding to is that sales cycles are complex. It is about consultative selling more than transactional selling, which
right.
we see in most high-ticket professional service firms. I mean, I'm yet to see a high 5, 6, 7 figures deal close without talking to a client. And just, with an opt-out page or opt-in page. That makes sense. And it's about building that trust, building that authority as you go, figuring out the root cause problem. I mean, you guys are solving complex human organizational structures. It takes more than just, one conversation to get there. And it makes sense. And it takes more than one conversation for the client to realize how big of a problem it is and to decide to act on it. Sometimes literally years. Yeah. So it does make a lot of sense. What's a bit of a curveball question for you, Alex? What's and you cannot say the name of the company because we already covered that. What is the number one challenge that you guys are facing now? What is the one nut that you're trying to crack that once you crack, you're going to take the whole thing to the next level? What would that be for you?
Do you mean when we're looking just like system-wide, what are the big problems that we're seeing organizations facing, or for us specifically in terms of challenges that we face?
Yeah, I'm talking about Dialogos. The reason I'm asking this question always towards the end of the interview is we will have people listening to us right now who are facing the same problem. And it's always interesting to see how your peers are thinking about the same challenge as you have right now and how they are thinking about solving it, right?
Yeah.
We don't have the answer yet, otherwise it would be a problem. But it's always interesting to have those ideas and things pop up in this podcast, which is also what I think the audience likes to hear. So for you, what would it be?
I think what comes up for me is there's so much that we want to do, and there's a lot of pieces that have been activated, and like I said before, like that seeds have been planted. And it's this challenge of, the shiny object dilemma. I think the problem of knowing, or not problem, but knowing when to say no to something to make more space for the yes. I think, we're a smaller group and we have such a big appetite to make impact and to do the work that we do. And I think it's very much, it can be a challenge to want to do so much, because you never want it to be at the detriment of the quality of offerings that we make. So I think, like, to put it into a nutshell, it's the idea of quality over quantity. But I think that harkens back to what I said earlier, where it's moving things forward, but not everything all together all at once. It's knowing when to move things forward and then to wait and pause and listen for what is truly calling us, and what do we feel most aligned with. I think so. We know the answer to our question, but a lot of the time it's just about this idea of slowing down and being patient and waiting for what wants to emerge to do so. I mean, and it's the same philosophy in the groups that we work with. It's this idea of just slowing down and sensing and being patient and letting what wants to emerge to do so. So it's our own medicine for us.
And the shiny object syndrome, right? Which is, I mean, I like what you're saying, and I'm going to piggyback on it a bit for people listening to us, because I think in the age of AI, and this has been said a gazillion times already, but it's very easy to, get lost with all the noise that there is versus really capturing the signal and wanting to do everything all at once. But I think the fundamental question at the end of the day is, what's the business goal? What's the plan to get there? And is that new potential shiny object helping us go better or faster to that business goal or not? And if the answer is no, then potentially not looking into it too much, unless it's like, no, but this could completely change the goal that we have in the first place, in which case it's interesting looking at it. But then if you do that every 3 months, you don't give it the time to get there eventually.
I think it's why it's so important to have the North Star, whether it's like for the individual personally,
Amen.
or so you always can check against that, like completely echoing what you said. Is this bringing me away from that or towards it?
Amen to that. This was Alexander Saunders, ladies and gentlemen. Alex, if people want to find out more about you, see what you do, where should they go?
Dialogos.com, great place to learn more about our work. I'm on LinkedIn. I think it's probably Alexander J or James Saunders, but just search for my Alexander Saunders. You can find me there. I'm happy to speak with anybody. This was way too short because I feel like we were just diving into a little bit of flow there, but I really enjoyed it, Guillaume.
Maybe that leaves room for an encore episode. Who knows? We'll put all the links in the description. What I can say for sure, Alex, is that you've gained at least one new connection on LinkedIn out of this interview. Me, I just added you. Alex, thank you so much.
Yes.
Here we go. Thank
you
you so much for coming on the Principal Podcast.
Thanks for joining us on this episode of the Principal Podcast. We hope you've learned valuable lessons and strategies to grow your firm and take your business to the next level. Make sure to subscribe and leave us a review wherever you're listening to this show so you never miss an episode. To apply and be a guest on the show, click the link in the description. See you next time.